Acting Solicitor General of the United States and NBC and MSNBC legal analyst. He's the man who wrote the Department of Justice's special counsel regulations back in 1999. And Neil, your reaction to what we've seen so far in terms of the latitude that's afforded to the Attorney General here and how he's conducted things thus far?
I think it's looking pretty good right now at this juncture. So, I mean, what happened today is really the close of a chapter, the Mueller investigation piece. And now Mueller is kind of like a relay racer, handing off the baton to other folks, to Congress, to state attorneys general, to the Southern District of New York, to other prosecutors investigating various things. But part of this investigation looks like it may be closed as well. There'll be those aforementioned declination decisions and the like. And what Barr did today in his letter was pretty significant. He said he's committed to transparency, that he wants to provide as much information as possible. And, you know, that's something that the president himself hinted at a couple days ago. And so I think the signs right now are all very positive.
Let me ask you this. Will it be the case that some members of Congress will get to see the whole thing? Or does, in a legal sense, officially, Barr really control access to the report unilaterally?
I think one way or the other, members of Congress and ultimately the American public are going to see almost everything. There could be some redactions for classified sources and methods, and maybe if there's some intimate private conduct or something like that, I could see those being excised. But the rest, and Ari, I think, said this so well, the touchstone here is public confidence in the administration of the rule of law. And any sort of hint of a cover-up, anything that tries to prevent that material from coming out, I think will be inconsistent with everything our Constitution and system of law is based on.
I want to play what Jerry Nadler, who's the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, just had to say about the report being transmitted to the Department of Justice. Take a listen.
We'll see what is made public. We'll react to that. And as I said, if it is not made public in its entirety, we will we'll use a compulsory process. We'll subpoena the report, and if necessary, we reserve the right to call Mueller before the committee, or maybe even Barr before the committee.
That's the sort of backstop here, right? I mean, I guess the idea is, as a sort of insurance against something being choked off the public could see, it is the case, of course, that House committee can call any of those people as witnesses.
Absolutely. They can call them, and maybe the president might try and block it on executive privilege or other grounds like that. But I think given the magnitude of the public's interest at stake, any attempt to squelch Mueller or the basic everything in the report except for classified material like that will be a red line. I think this Congress will fight that tooth and nail because it is fundamentally a betrayal of American principles. And so, you know, that's a red line that I think I really hope this president doesn't cross. I give him credit this week. He said he wanted the report to be public. That's what Barr's statement today also suggests. So I think right now, at least, we're in a good trajectory.
Yeah, I should say in the opening statement, of course, William Barr came before the Senate Judiciary Committee for confirmation, sort of in the midst of all this, while the of dubious constitutional authority, Matt Whitaker, was occupying that position. And this is what Barr had to say in his opening statement about what he saw as his role in terms of public transparency. Take a listen.
I also believe it is very important that the public and Congress be informed of the results of the special counsel's work. My goal will be to provide as much transparency as I can consistent with the law. I can assure you that where judgments are to be made, I will make those judgments based solely on the law, and I will not let personal, political, or other improper interests influence my decision.
What are you looking for to make sure that that is the case, basically, as we go forward here?
I think it's got to be almost the entire Mueller report, except for those limited exceptions that I said about classified information and intimate conduct. I think anything short of that will be seen as a smacking of a cover-up and inconsistent with the transparency that he promised. And there's certainly no regulation, the special counsel regulations don't forbid it, and nothing in DOJ policy that forbids a more fulsome explanation when you have really a unique case of which this is. I mean, this is here's Ferguson times a million. And obviously in Ferguson, as you were just saying, there was a lot of information about the declination decision that was revealed. And, you know, look, if they don't do that, if they try and suppress that, then Congress is just going to have to reinvent the entire Mueller investigation. That's just going to drag things out, but they're going to get this material one way or the other.
That's well said. Neil Kochel, as always, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.